reality of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where we explore the strange and the unexplained. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, and thanks for joining us. The Phantoms and Monsters Radio channel is made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. Super chat donations and super thanks donations are essential for us to continue offering you our unique content. And you can also support the channel by using the Buy Me a Coffee link or banner in the description below. So your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. So tonight we have a Mothman winged humanoid roundtable. And we have joining us first Tobias Wayland, who's a passionate Fortean who has been actively investigating the unusual for over a decade. The first several years of his investigative career were spent as a MUFON field investigator, and following that, he investigated independently prior to becoming the head writer and editor of the Singular Fortean Society. Now, Tobias is a frequent guest on various podcasts and radio shows, has contributed to several books on the paranormal, and is often invited to speak at paranormal conferences and events. He is also featured in the Small Town Monsters documentary, Terror in the Skies, in the series premiere of Expedition X, for his work investigating Mothman sightings around Lake Michigan. He and his wife, Emily, have been involved in the Lake Michigan Mothman investigation since its advent in the spring of 2017, and recently published the book Chronicling Experience, the Lake Michigan Mothman High Strangeness in the Midwest. His years as an investigator have served him best by illustrating that when it comes to the anomalous, the preternatural, and paranormal, any answers he's found are still hopefully outnumbered by questions. And you can find the Singular Fortean Society at singularfortean.com. Manuel Navarette is the founder and curator of UFO Clearinghouse as an active paranormal investigator. He is currently one of the chief investigators of the Chicago Lake Michigan Mothman phenomena, along with Lon Strickler and Tobias Wayland, and a member of the Phantoms and Monsters 14 research team. Manuel has been interested in the paranormal since the age of 17 and has had multiple sightings of UFOs and recently of a winged humanoid at the Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The website he founded, UFO Clearinghouse, is a website dedicated to and committed to providing the most up-to-date information on recent UFO sightings, reported alien abductions, and cryptid sightings. It is designed as a place where information can be freely exchanged and accessed by paranormal researchers and investigators for the reason of furthering the search for the truth. And that can be, UFO Clearinghouse can be found at ufoclearinghouse.wordpress.com. Travis Shortt is a native of Virginia. He trained and served earlier in life as an ordained minister before pursuing his career in broadcasting and eventually media relations. He developed an early interest in the paranormal and supernatural with the zeal for UFOs, hauntings, and the occult. He became interested in the events around the Mothman sightings after reading about the original events in the book by Jerome Clark. He, Charlie McCracken, and Matthew Fleming began an in-depth investigation in 2003 that culminated in 2009 with the first feature documentary on the topic, Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicle. He holds a degree in communication from the University of Virginia's College at Wise and pursued a master's degrees in theology from Masters International School of Divinity. He's currently serves as Chief Marketing Officer for Vectors Partners, LLC, a technology firm in Tennessee, and is founder of Phoenix Publicity, and along with Matthew Fleming, is one of the producers and researchers for Dark Wings, the Mothman Chronicles. From 2006 to 2009, he served as featured speaker at the Mothman Festival, addressing the spiritual and religious implication of the Mothman sighting. So, guys, thank you for joining me this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I think what I'm going to start out with is this whole Mothman winged humanoid phenomenon in general, and what you think people are actually seeing. Now, I had a sighting years ago. I know Manuel had a sighting at the airport about a year or so ago. But still, I mean, we've been investigating this phenomenon for a long time now, all of us, in some whatever capacity. What do you believe we're dealing with? Let me start out with Travis.
Well, much like you guys, I find the phenomena very interesting for lots of reasons. But my personal belief is we're not dealing with a cryptid, and I've made that known on several different broadcasts and podcasts and things like that. I do believe we're dealing with something that is either interdimensional or something that is spiritual in some component. I do believe that very, very heartfelt.
I mean, when you say you don't think it's, could it be interdimensional and a cryptid?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I don't think it falls into the same category as, say, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, that sort of thing. I think we're dealing with something that is totally unique.
Mm-hmm.
in its makeup, in the descriptions that are being given, in its activity, and in the feelings that people have when they interact with these entities.
How about you, Manuel?
I kind of agree. I mean, we are dealing with a cryptid, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't fit the description of like a flesh and blood cryptid, like you would like Bigfoot or, upright canines or something like that. Mm-hmm. It seems to, materialize in and out at will. How many times have people just say it straight up disappeared? In fact, one of the recent sightings, the guy says it flew up in the air and just outright disappeared in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean, something tells me it's either ethereal or it's able to open, dimensional gates or some kind to jump in and out that, or it has some unnatural ability to cloak itself. There's something really interesting I saw not too long ago about it was a documentary on sharks. I was watching with my son, but sharks have kind of a dual camouflage. So if you're looking down at them from the surface, they blend in with the darkness underneath them with the water. But if you're looking up at them from above, they have a white underside that allows them to blend in with the light that shines from above. So it breaks up their silhouette. Maybe this thing has got some kind of adaptive camouflage. It's able to do that. It's able to see us and or make itself known or disappear right in front of us. But I kind of think at the same time, I agree with Travis. I mean, it's not a flesh and blood creature, or if it is, it's able to jump in and out of this reality, at will.
How about you, Tobias?
Well, it's difficult to make any sort of firm determination when it comes to this being or entity or category of beings or whatever. I think that it's easier for me to say what I don't think it is than it would be for me to say what I actually think it might be. So I think that, just like Travis and Manuel have been talking about, I think that there is plenty of evidence, in the eyewitness testimony that should sort of steer our thinking away from, something easily explained using mainstream science. It certainly doesn't seem to follow very many rules of biology that we would expect if it was, some sort of undiscovered biological species. So that's the thing that I can say for sure. And beyond that, yeah, I mean, we can only speculate. I do find it interesting that some witnesses have described this thing as disappearing very suddenly. Other people have even mentioned portals. There are the seemingly paranormal aspects, like the glowing red eyes, the feeling of fear, or as though one is being probed. People have talked about feeling like the thing basically just looked right through them, could see into their soul almost. And so that's not normal. That's not something you would expect. Even people who are terrified, who run into a bear or something in the woods, that's not how they describe their experience. It's a different kind of fear. And so I think whatever it is, assuming that we can trust the eyewitness testimony, and at this point, I don't have much reason to think that I can't, then we really have to consider that what we're dealing with is something very, very far outside of our current understanding.
Yeah. Well, I think we can all agree that these are not indigenous beings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not here all the time, unless they're damn good hiders. I mean, I kind of find it hard to believe that they're here. I mean, of course, with the sightings we've had, even going back to Point Pleasant, those were fleeting sightings for the most part. Though that thing in Point Pleasant made itself well known. It was somewhat aggressive and kind of stuck around for a longer period of time, but would take off. And the same what's going on in around Chicago and some of the other sightings we've had around North America. That these things, they show themselves, and that's it. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think any of the evidence that we have collected in recent years demonstrates something that is here all the time. I don't know what you guys think about that. Do you think there is a possibility that it's indigenous or not, Travis?
I think that one's is a tougher call to make.
Right.
You mentioned Point Pleasant, going back to that, that was a span of sightings over 13 months. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the Chicago sightings right now, we're getting pretty close. They've been going on for how long?
Oh my God. Well, it started in 2011 and with 3. So we're talking 11 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, these sightings have been going on much longer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is an indigenous entity to planet Earth, or if it is, as you said, this entity that sometimes comes into our reality. And I don't even know if they are intentionally coming into our reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes they are. I think Point Pleasant, it was an intentional. There was definitely intelligent intent in Point Pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
It showed up at multiple locations. It chased a car. There was an intent in those sightings. As far as it being indigenous to this world, I don't know. That's a tough call.
What do you think, Manuel?
I kind of agree with Travis. I mean, they are not as prevalent as other cryptids. I mean, look at the Sasquatch. I mean, they've been known for centuries. The Native Americans spoke of them. Sasquatch, I believe, means man of the woods, the old man of the woods, or something like that. But so many native tribes from all over the world has talked about the Sasquatch. I mean, you have the Orang Pendek in Indonesia. You have the Yeti in Tibet. You have Yowie. You have just so many different variations of these creatures, and they're all in the historical record because from passed down through the Native Americans. I mean, almost I would believe it'd be like anywhere between 90 to almost every Native American tribe has some kind of story that's Sasquatch related.
Yep.
The flying creature, the flying humanoids, they've been around. I mean, there's stories, reports of them from the 1800s. In Germany, there's sightings in Vietnam by American soldiers. And not to also mention, you have like the flying entities like in Aztec and Mayan, like Quetzalcoatl, and some of these other entities. But they are not as. I would think I'm more apt to believe that Bigfoot is more terrestrial than these entities. I mean, these entities seem to come in and out, disappear. They don't make their presence known. There's sightings that people have of Bigfoot that can last, repeatedly, for minutes, even hours. These things, I don't think we've ever had sightings that have lasted more than maybe a minute or two.
Yeah, they're not long.
Yeah, they're not very long, and they disappear. So either they're shifting in and out, like Travis said, of our dimension unintentionally and just being seen, or they're maybe, again, either able to camouflage themselves so no one sees them, or only allowing themselves to be seen for fleeting moments, moments before they either shift back to their reality or just completely disappear altogether.
Mm.
Can I piggyback real quickly on that? Just real quickly. Because what Manuel was saying struck a chord. Every culture has encounters with and a belief in flying entities. Everyone. But they have never been viewed as indigenous to this world. They are always coming from somewhere else,
right,
manifesting themselves. So I think he hits on a really important point there, is that while Mothman, and I still hate that term, and I'm in media, and I hate the fact that they coined that term.
Yeah, we kind of got stuck of that.
We got stuck with that. But that entity, as far as I'm concerned, has been seen for millennia by every culture and every people that exists on this planet. But the entity itself is not indigenous to this planet.
Tobias? You're muted.
Yeah, well, there's the Mothman at work sabotaging my
yeah, there we go,
microphone. Naturally, I'll go ahead and blame him. I think we have to really consider that word indigenous. Now, do I think that these winged humanoids exist in the same way we do, in the same spaces that we do all the time? Certainly not. But I don't think that rules out them being indigenous to this planet. If you consider something like multi-dimensionality, right? So, and when I use the word dimension, I really mean it for what it is, not referring to some parallel universe or something, but as an aspect of the universe that you either are privy to or are not. So as three-dimensional beings, we have width and depth and length, and that's how we experience things. Now, if you can imagine something that was privy to more dimensions, like how they might interact with us might be very similar to how we would react to something that only had two dimensions, for instance. So if you can imagine a creature who's perfectly flat, right? Like they only have two dimensions, and here we are, these super beings with three, a whole nother dimension. And how we would interact with them is we would be able to enter their dimension, at which point they could interact with us, or at least observe us, or part of us, and withdraw ourselves at will. And it would seem like amazing magic to them. And they probably wouldn't be able to wrap their heads around how or why we were able to do it. But that doesn't mean that we aren't existing around them all the time. We're just not entering like they're like a dimension that they're able to perceive. Like we're just not in a dimension in which they also exist. And so I think when you apply that thinking to the Mothman problem, I think it allows for them to be indigenous to the planet without having to exist on it in the same way that we do. And I think, when you look at the history of winged beings in culture, then, it would be fair to say that it's possible that they could have been with us forever, frankly. And if so, maybe that's how they exist alongside us without existing in the exact same way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we've had some pretty interesting developments with our investigation over the past 6 months or so, where we have had possible interaction with these beings. And Manuel has had that, and I think Tobias believes he may have had it to some degree. We have 2 other members of the team who have had this interaction. And from all indications that these are some type of ultra-terrestrial being that is making its way onto our Earth plane. Now, do we still believe that? Is that something that, even though it hasn't been as to the degree it had been before, do we still believe that that's very possible? And do you think it's still something we can pursue?
I honestly think it is something that's still, within the realm of possibility. But I mean, when it comes to investigating the paranormal, I mean, everyone has to kind of agree. Everything's within the realm of possibility. I mean, it could be, extra dimensional. It could be, I've heard people say it could be angelic. It could be demonic. Had a very interesting conversation with somebody not too long ago who was saying that maybe it was angelic because they did cite that, what you see in Christianity is portraying of angels is not exactly what, they exactly look like.
Right.
Some of them are very different, especially the upper angels. But I kind of think that this is still an avenue that's still there for possibility, for exploring. I mean, we had a lot of extensive contact with them. A lot of people on the team have had extensive contact and, experiences, myself included, Tobias included. It could be that they maybe, backed off or kind of cooled their heels a little bit. And maybe this is just, we're seeing them revamp again or, revamp their activity again. But it could be anything. I mean, it could still be, angelic, demonic, extraterrestrial, ultra-dimensional, even ultra-terrestrial, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
It could be any number of things. The object for investigators like us is to, peel back the layers and try to expose it and try to, get to an answer. Even let's say extraterrestrial. Look at so many reports, especially if you read it, if you're really into like the Dulce reports on the Dulce sightings and stuff. So many reptilians, many of them called Dragos, which are upper echelon, royalty kind of caste, but they have wings and they have the ability to fly. Things such as, maybe gargoyles. Gargoyles have been around. They're winged creatures that have been with us since basically the dawn of time. How do we not know that any of these things, it's maybe this is what we're seeing as the modern day version of it?
Possibly. We got a question here from Android Purity, which kind of ties into this. If cryptids like Mothman and Dogman are coming from another dimension, then do y'all believe they are from the same or different dimensions? Well, I can say from some of the information that we have received, and this is coming through our team members, Jennifer and Bernadette, that they do reside on a linear plane, a linear dimension, where many other cryptids that are described on our Earth plane reside. Now, we have no proof of that. This is just what we're being told. But I think there's a strong possibility that may very well be. You know, I've said for a long time, and you know, others may be starting to become more open-minded about this, that I think Bigfoot and other cryptids are some type of interdimensional being to some degree at some point. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, you know, especially when you look at some of the sightings of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, they do have non-corporeal traits. They sometimes they're seen and then they immediately disappear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on the show that I was on with Kev Baker and Bill Bean and Derek Sturman, we had a couple of Bigfoot sightings that came on, and they'd watched a Bigfoot actually walk through a fence, not
Mm-hmm.
destroy it, but just walk through the actual material onto the other side. So I think all of these entities do exist. You know, as you said, are they all kind of in the same in the same interdimensional zip code? I don't know about that, but they all exist in that realm. And going back to what Manuel said, you know, about angelic, demonic, you know, again, I think that is humanity's way, especially from a Judeo-Christian ideological, theological sense, to put a framework around something. So I think that what we call angels and demons may be what the indigenous people of this planet, other cultures, other countries have called other things. Quetzalcoatl, fiery serpent, the winged serpent that brought knowledge. In the Judeo-Christian standpoint, you got the seraphim, which are the fiery serpents that fly and are messengers, and then you've got the cherubim, which are winged entities as well. So I think a lot of what we, the four of us and other individuals, are doing is basically tearing away preconceived ideas of what these entities are and trying to reframe that in a broader scope that doesn't tie it to any one culture, any one religion, any one people, but it's the incident itself. It's the entities themselves.
We have another question from Davy Jones Locker, and he's asked, what do you guys think Mothman wants? You know, that's a question I think we've all been battling with for a long time. Personally, I think that these beings have been among us for a long time, maybe not as much now as at one point. And that's why it's great having Travis here, because he's an ordained minister and he was, you know, graduated from a theology backing. And I think from what we have heard and understand, that these beings that we're experiencing, or people experiencing in Chicago, may have had issues with the monotheist believers, and which actually ended up having them being persecuted or removed, or, you know, they've gone back into the shadows or into the other dimension. I don't know what they really want. Can any of you guys give any thoughts on that? That maybe what do they want?
Boy, that's certainly the question, isn't it? You know, my opinion on that has fluctuated. We'll say, you know, quite a bit over these past several years. You know, at first, the fear seemed so prevalent in the sightings that I couldn't help but think that was the point. You know, for whatever reason, I really couldn't wrap my head around what else these entities would be gaining out of interacting with people, because it certainly doesn't seem as though they need to. They should be able to avoid encountering anybody if that's their goal. But instead, you seem to have these things showing up almost intentionally terrifying people and then vanishing. You know, and as time went on, I guess I I still keep that sort of in the back of my mind, but I don't know that it's the entire point. It could be the point of a particular interactions because they have some motive for scaring people off. Now, the reason that I'm starting to sort of think in that direction now is based on some spirit box sessions that we've had recently, my wife Emily and I. And in our most recent one, I intentionally tried to contact the beings referred to as the unseen ones, who may be responsible for some of the winged humanoid sightings around Lake Michigan, and we certainly seemed to be in contact with something. It was an interesting conversation, and during it, I got the idea that the narrative being spun to me was more or less that they had been present, during some of our other experiences. So, I know we've talked considerably about the Kettle Moraine State Forest, for instance, and the experiences we've had out there. And so, they claim to have been present for some of those, maybe all of them. And then went on to talk about certain, what I got out of it, the narrative, again, the narrative that seemed to be presented to me. It's possible that I was misinterpreting something, but this is what I believed it to be. And, going on to talk about, potentially certain areas being more open, the Kettle Moraine State Forest being one of those, apparently. And then talking about some kind of risk. And that was, to me, is something that really stuck out, because I thought about it and I thought, okay, well, if there are specific areas, say, that are of interest, to these beings or entities, and there's some level of risk involved, be it to them or be it to us, wouldn't it make a certain amount of sense if anybody were to blunder into one of these areas, especially if it happened to be at some particular time that was particularly high risk, for them to just want to scare people off, be like, well, you shouldn't be here right now. And the best way to get rid of you is to scare the crap out of you. So you're going to want to leave. And then the only other, really interesting thing that stuck out to me during that particular conversation was big water was mentioned, which is kind of funny if you think about it, because it seems like a nonsense term. But Lake Michigan is big water, right? Like that's a hell of a lake, and so it seemed to me that there was some kind of connection with that as well, and that's something like when I started referring to the Lake Michigan Mothman, literally Lake Michigan was just a convenient geographic location that seemed to sort of be the epicenter, but not necessarily directly related to everything happening around it. But maybe there's more to it than I previously suspected.
Well, I think this is a good point to start going into what's been going on lately. Now, most people are familiar with what we've been dealing with these sightings in around Chicago, especially around O'Hare. So let me, and Travis, I know you can bear with us here, but you're familiar with what's going on with these sightings. So anyway, Manuel, you've been receiving these reports. So this Bensonville, I don't know, what do you flap of sightings?
Yeah, I want to say flap.
Yeah, I think we've had 5 of them within the last 3 weeks. I had one years ago from the same area. Now, for those who don't know where Bensonville is, it's southwest of O'Hare International. It's about 1.5 miles or a little bit more from the cargo area or the cemetery at O'Hare, where a lot of these other sightings have been culminating at. So there may be a direct connection there. But anyway, start off with what was been going on in Bensonville and what people have been reporting.
Well, I mean, we had the one that first started was the one with the gentleman who was a truck driver. He worked for a company that did a kind of a construction rental company. They rent out like man lifts and portable generators and loaders, stuff like that. And his job is that he's a truck driver. He takes his stuff, drops it off the construction site, and when they're done with it, he goes and picks it up and brings it back to the yard. Well, he was bringing one back. It was already nighttime, and he had just arrived at the facility. Had dropped off the man lift. Basically, he says it's just he was using an RGN or removable gooseneck. So basically, unhooks from the trailer. The trailer becomes a ramp, drives it off, hooks back up, and was getting ready to take the truck and park it when he saw movement. And toward the back of the facility, they have storage containers. Basically, they're overseas containers, which you see like all over the multimodal containers. But they have them. They had bought them and use them for storage. So he went back there to check because they have literally millions of dollars of tools. Not only do they rent construction tools, they rent like jackhammers and all sorts of other stuff. So this stuff is used for storage. And he just wanted to make sure no one was back there trying to get into one of these containers and steal. He says he saw movement. And he starts yelling out, I don't know who you are. I'm going to call the police if you don't get out of here. That's when he was confronted with a 7-foot tall winged humanoid. But he says the weird thing was it was chirping at him. It started with chirps, been clicks, and been chirping, and been just rapid fire clicks. I believe this is the one that he said that he was a history buff. He was comparing it to in World War II, the Allied, especially the airborne, had little clickers, little brass clickers that they carried around. That's how they communicated with one another. They had, a set of predetermined clicks. That's how they ID themselves and were able to communicate. He called it a man bat, which I was kind of really hesitant. Being a DC fan, I was kind of hesitant to call it a man bat, but that's what he called it. He says it stood up and started clicking at him, and then, 7-foot tall, thin, large wings. He says it took off into the air as soon as he had grabbed what's called a maglite, which is a very long, thin, aluminum cased flashlight. You see the police carry them. They're not only can be used as a flashlight, but they can also double as a baton. They carry a lot of heft to them. And he started approaching it. He shined the light at it, and the thing took off on him. So he was scared. He ran. He says he practically sprinted back to the truck, and got in the truck and parked it and got pretty much got the hell out of there. I believe a few days later we had the second sighting, and this second sighting was only, I want to say, 2 to 3 blocks away from the facility. In an almost diagonal direction, going from south to west.
And it was seen on the same day as the previous sighting.
Yes, exactly. Right around the same time, somebody was coming home from work. She had pulled in her driveway, got out of the car. She was walking toward the house, and she kept hearing like chirping, and she looked up and she saw what she described as a thin man with wings fly over. She said that it was just high enough above the trees and the houses to clear them. Flew over her house across the street where another neighbor saw it, and then just flew off into the night. And if you draw a diagonal line, it's almost just a straight shot. So what I'm thinking we saw was maybe, same being seen by somebody else. Then we had the sighting with.
And I do have to mention, you went out there and investigated, and the Chicago police were kind of interested in what you were doing because
the Bentonville police,
they thought you were a prowler.
Yeah, someone called me in and said I was casing houses and because I'm out there with a camera and just taking, you know, photos and looking around, and
Yeah.
they must have thought I was casing a house or something. And
Well, I guess that's understandable.
once I explained it to them, they kind of understood. They just told me, you know, be careful, and you know, I kind of wrapped up and left. So didn't want them thinking I was trying to break into somebody's house or something.
Right.
But the couple of days later, we had the incident with the couple. It was two witnesses. They were out for a walk. I don't know if you know, Tobias can vouch for me, but lately we'd had like a light string of late season cold snaps, and eventually the weather started just turning warm, and everyone just started going out. So they were out, enjoying themselves, enjoying the not having to wear coats and jackets and everything out there. So they were by the elementary school. They said that they had heard the same thing, chirping, clicking. They saw a person on top of the school, of the building itself, and they had caught it as it was spreading open its wings and just jumped, basically took a leap off the building and flew off over the playground, across the field, and into the night. So it was dusk. So when the sighting happened, so they were able to still see the object. Flew right over the top of them. Scared the living daylights out of them. So much so the second witness did not want to talk about it. He did not want to even deal with it. They were the first witness was very forthcoming, but they said it was a very scary experience. And then just this week, we've had a couple of sightings. The first one was an Amazon driver out doing his deliveries. He said he had dropped off some packages at the house, was walking back to the van when he again started hearing clicking and chirping. And this is what's tying all of them together. Not only the basic area, which is, I want to say, within a 1.5 mile, area where all these sightings are happening, which are right on the end of the airport. But every encounter with this entity lately has all been the same: thin, frail, large red eyes, and then but the clicking and the chirping is something completely different.
Yeah, that's something I don't think we've had experience with at all with these sightings.
Yeah. And, people have always said, it's looking right at them and chirping, clicking. Almost makes me kind of think like it might be either a form of communication or maybe kind of like how dolphins use a clicking sound to
echolocation.
Yeah, kind of be able to see and determine what something is in front of them. Humpbacks are very well known not humpbacks, I'm sorry, sperm whales are known to do that. That's how they hunt in the depths of the ocean. But this thing was on top of a house. It was looking straight at him when he saw it and scared the bejesus out of him. He says this thing just took straight off in the air and just basically disappeared. He was saying he was trying to look around, trying to find it. Maybe it went behind the trees. He says it just disappeared on him, just completely out of sight. He walked back to his truck, kept looking around, got in the truck and left, was still looking around, never saw anything else again. And then the final sighting was the one that I actually was at this afternoon in the area just to do some field investigating. I will probably be going back with my son tomorrow with it. But it was a father and a daughter setting up outside. They were setting up the patio, putting the barbecue grill out and everything, getting ready for some events. They looked up and they saw, the daughter said that she pulled her attention. There were 3 flying beings. He described them as men with wings that were about 60 to 70 feet up from they were just circling. He described it in the report as circling like buzzards. But he said that these were distinctly human-shaped objects. the daughter was able to get a short video and some pictures, which I submitted to the team as well to the website. So if you want to go see them, they're either going to be on phantomsmonsters.com
Well,
or
we've got them here, so I think Vincent will put her up in a minute.
Yeah. He said it was kind of funny. He was saying that I'm an electrician. I'm not a photographer. He was trying his best. I'm guessing they were using a cell phone, so they weren't able to get like great detail, but it's still something.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was, when in speaking with him, this gentleman sits in almost direct line about 1.5 miles from the runways of O'Hare. That's why I went out there today to check the area. And as I was telling you guys, I worked in the area when I first started, my career. That area is where the planes are coming in on their final approach to O'Hare. They are very slow, low, and loud. We're talking jumbo jets and whatnot. There is no way somebody can describe what these are on the screen with let's say a 777 flying over your head. They rattle everything around there. And this is like, I think the queue for O'Hare on a busy day is like 45 seconds apart from one another. So as soon as one's landing and getting off the runway, the next one's already on the final approach. He says he's lived there for, I believe it's a little over 10 years in that house. So he's used to the planes flying overhead, but he says they're so low and slow that you can see great details. You can actually see, individual pieces of the plane and everything. There's no way you're going to confuse that with these objects. These objects were 60, 70 feet up in the air. They were small. They were, circling around. There's no way somebody's ever going to be trying that. I don't even think parachutists get that close to each other. And you would have seen a parachutist. No one's going to. The position where they were at would have put them directly over the expressway. I don't think anyone's crazy enough to even try. It's residential neighborhoods on both sides of the expressway. So parachuting into that area would have just been crazy. So that ruled it out. So I'm apt to believe him. He did say he was open to speaking with him. I did tell him I was going to put him in contact with some of the other investigators. He was very open about it. He was just straightforward. He says that, I saw what I saw. It's like, the pictures aren't great, but, we got what we could. And this is, a good thing. I mean, teenagers always have their phones in their hands. I know mine does. It's practically surgically implanted to his hand. So, this thing is a stroke of luck. She was able to get pictures and a short video of it, but even though it's still something, and it definitely shows that this is not a plane of any kind. It could still be a bird. It could still be a group of birds. But I'm more apt to believe that, maybe he did see something that was beyond his explanation.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And the thing is, when I was reading that sighting report, once you sent it over and looking at the images and everything, I was really reminded of nothing more than the Pilsen sighting from 2018, where you had the guy bicycling to work, and he saw this weird thing in the air, and he got a bunch of GoPro footage because he had a GoPro camera attached to his bicycle helmet, which was awesome. I wish everybody did that. And I talked to him. I know Lon talked to him. We were both in agreement that this guy was completely forthright. Like, he was describing his authentic experience when he talked about seeing what he described as either a giant bat or a man in a wingsuit, but like we got that footage from him. He was so forthcoming with that he mailed me the SD card, like the original SD card. Like, this guy had nothing to hide. But we got that footage and we blew it up, and it was a bird. Like, it was definitely a bird. I think it was something big, like a great blue heron or something, probably. But 110%, it was a bird. And so when I'm reading their sighting, I don't think these people are lying. I don't think that at all.
Mhm.
But I do think it's possible that that the actual explanation for their sighting is something similar to what we saw out of Pilsen in 2018. It's just mostly kind of lacking the other paranormal stuff, like it's like daytime and there isn't any of the other paranormal aspects. I think that we really look for in the more otherworldly profile of these sightings. You know what I mean?
Now, what would be interesting if we start getting or hearing reports out of a hair of people saying they're seeing UFO activity over a hair, and it starts looking like what he got captured.
Well, and I was thinking the exact same thing. That image actually looks more like some of the more recent UAP footage that I've seen than it does anything else.
Yeah. And we've had craft sightings with some of these reports. We had the
one over Rest Haven Cemetery.
We had the thing over Rest Haven, plus we had the
Lake Michigan
security guard that had the V-shaped craft along with the sighting as well. So
we also had the one of Montrose Harbor, and the one that was reported to MUFON where they saw a green orb, flying across the horizon, just after seeing a sighting of a winged humanoid. So, I think whatever it was, I mean, it's. I mean, I'm not an expert. I can't go in there and tell you if it was, Photoshop, but I mean, I would think that it's kind of hard to do that with a cell phone. I mean, these things, it shows that there is something there. I mean, cell phones don't have exactly the greatest resolution unless you're talking like higher end phones, like the iPhones, the newer iPhones or something like that.
It's always frustrating when you get a shot like that and trying to zoom up on it, hoping to God you're going to have something there. It's going to be definitive, and it just never works out. We got a question from Scott Baker, and I'm going to throw this at Travis for his opinion. How come you think these monsters, or in our case, Mothman or winged beings, have different eye color?
Good question.
Especially the glowing red.
Glowing red.
As opposed, I mean, because the way people describe these things it's not reflective, it's more projected light.
Yes.
And I know when I had my encounter back in '88, it was the same thing. It was a projected light. What do you think the reason behind that is?
Well, sure, I get that one. Give it to the guy who used to be a preacher. No, I think there's different ways to look at this. Real quickly, one of the things I was going to point out when Manuel was talking, the way that the eyewitnesses in the most recent sightings describe this entity are almost identical to the way that Linda Scarberry described her sightings.
Right.
A tall, thin, muscular man with wings. Those were her exact words. Like I said, that's why I hate the misnomer Mothman. There's nothing moth-like, insect-like about it. The glowing red eyes have always been part of this history. And I think possibly because these entities are coming from another dimension. There's a different energy about them than there is about us. We all, as humans, have different eye colors. Mm-hmm. These entities that seem to always have this glowing red eye. And Lon, you're right. A lot of people have tried to describe it away as being reflective, but the eyewitnesses never describe it as reflective. It is always emanating from within these beings.
Right.
And I think that's because these beings are a higher energy frequency, a higher energy level than what we are as human beings.
Well, I tell you that they have not always been red, though I'd say 95% of the eye colors have been red. We have had blue eyes up in Wisconsin, and we've had green eyes up in Milwaukee. So I don't know. Are they from the same dimension, or are they just something, or maybe it's perspective?
And maybe their eye color dictates their dimension. Maybe that's where they're coming from. You got red eye entities, blue eye entities, green eye entities. So, going back to another question that was asked, what do they want? I'm not so sure that maybe they're not just curious or interested.
Well, that may very well be.
That they may be as intrigued by us as we are of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that another thing with this unseen, and hopefully, since Tobias is using a ghost box on this and trying to get information, I've got one too. I may start using that. Well, or send it over to Jennifer and or Bernadette to have them see what they can find. They have been told that these beings that we are seeing are juveniles of their species. It's kind of like a rite of passage thing. That the higher ups in the hierarchy don't go out on these ventures, and that the younger ones go out as part of what they're supposed to do. I don't know. I don't understand the whole thing, but if that's the case, then this has been going on for 11 years now, and it may be something they have been doing all along, but just now it's starting to get noticed. And of course, the history of these, the history of the flying beings and the flying or winged humanoids and others, when you put it all together, it's fairly similar, even down through history. But I think you all can agree that what's been going on in Chicago in the last, especially since 2017, is quite unique.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything that compares to it, to be honest with you.
I mean, and one of the things, this last sighting, I know that there's something there. Could it be a bird like Tobias talked about? We don't know. I recently got to see a heron for the first time, up close. There was one in the field across the street from where I work.
Uh-huh.
And you don't think it, but they are huge.
Oh, they're big.
They are some big birds. And I'm talking, this thing was maybe standing maybe 4.5 feet tall. I just happened to just look out the window from my desk and saw it. And that's like, wow. I can imagine it being, late at night or something, in low light conditions or something that could, scare the living daylights out of somebody, especially if you're not used to seeing them, up close. This thing took off. Its wingspan was immense. So, could it be? Yes. The thing with the eyes, could it be? We just know so little about, even now in modern times, we know so little about animals and their physiologies. Example, look at like the mantis shrimp. It's able to see in so many colors that some of them we haven't even discovered yet. I think its eyes can pick up, I believe, what was it, Tobias, about 14, 15 different spectrums of light.
Yeah. That's a sore subject with me because I used to have a reef aquarium and got my thumb busted open by one of those things one time.
Yeah, and
oh yeah, they will do that.
They're awful.
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine. His actually busted the side of the aquarium.
Oh, they cracked it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But there is so much. look at the some animals. They look like their eyes glow. Look at alligators. If you look at them, if you're ever down south and you shine even a low intensity light across the water, you're going to get met with a whole bunch of eyes staring right back at you. How do we not know that these creatures maybe don't collect the light, kind of like a cat's eyes do? They have that, and it reflects back. It looks like it's glowing, but all it's doing is it's collecting what little light our eyes can't see and just reflecting it back to enhance their vision.
Well, and maybe the other thing is, maybe their eye color reflects their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And we associate red with evil and something ominous. That's not necessarily the case. It's a color. It's like, I kind of adhere to the George Carlin mentality when it comes to bad words. I don't think there's a bad word. They're words. They're a construct of different letters that are tied together. We associate red with evil, demonic, ominous. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe this is maybe we're seeing their emotion. Maybe they're as scared of us as we are of them, and we're seeing it in red. Maybe if they're blue eyes, they're not scared at all. If they're green eyes, maybe they come from Ireland.
We have another question from David Jones Locker. Do you think it's all connected with ghosts, poltergeist, UFOs, Sasquatch, and Fae? Oh, I think there's a connection between all this stuff. It's to some degree. It seems like every time you get into an investigation nowadays, when you start talking to the witness, it seems something else has been going on in their life as far as paranormal or supernatural that they just decided not to talk about because they didn't think it was connected. But invariably, it's something that may very well have been connected.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Tobias?
Well, sure, definitely. That's something I always ask when I'm interviewing a witness. I'll say something like, have you had any other unusual experiences, prior to or since like this sighting that you are currently reporting? And as often as not, they actually do. I can give you an example that sort of ties in directly to this question. There was a woman in Madison, Wisconsin that I spoke to, had to be a couple years ago now. And she wanted to talk about this series of winged humanoid sightings that she had with her mother. And while these winged humanoid sightings were happening, they were also experiencing a haunting or what appeared to be a haunting in their home. I'm talking about a very classic sort of like haunting phenomena, like hearing the cupboards open and all the dishes fly out and everything crashing to the ground, only to run out and find nothing disturbed. Or there was a frightening incident where the candles in her aunt's apartment just like lit on their own and almost burned the place down. Luckily, somebody noticed in time. And so, this is a very Keelian one. They would hear a baby crying with no known source. Like they couldn't figure out where the sound of this baby crying was coming from. And this is all during the winged humanoid sightings. And so there's definitely some kind of connection. Although, I don't know that it's fair to say that it's all the same thing. I like to think that it is disparate phenomena operating under the same or a similar set of rules. You know what I mean? I think that whatever these things are, be they ghosts or Mothmen or Bigfoots or whatever, that seemingly interacts with us in paranormal ways, they're doing so under the same set of rules. Like there are physical laws in place that are sort of regulating how they do these seemingly paranormal feats. And so there seem to be a lot of similarities, but it's mostly just that they interact with us in similar ways and don't necessarily have to be the exact same thing.
Anybody have anything else to add to that?
Well, how many times have we seen? I'm sorry, Travis.
No. You go for it.
How many times have we seen where people have had UFO sightings, abduction experiences, and many of them almost exactly mimic a poltergeist event, or vice versa? They're having a poltergeist event, and yet, everything they're describing sounds like the typical abduction scenario. Who's not to say? I mean, that it could be any number of things. I mean, hearing a child cry for no reason at all brings, kind of raises my hackles for kind of a few reasons. I live in the Midwest, and there's certain things I won't say that are the only things that really scare me to death. So hearing a baby cry is one of their signs. So I'm not going to even talk about it. So, but how many of these things so intricately tied together? Shadow people encounters with abductions, with alien sightings, or UFO sightings, or vice versa.
And I agree with exactly what all three of you have said. And I'm just going to add one dimension to that, and that is that all of these things I do believe are interrelated in some form or fashion, but it may not be the experience, it may be the experiencer. We are receptacles. We receive and we put out. And so you find individuals, we call them skeptics, disbelievers. They've never experienced anything in their life. Well, maybe that's because they're not on that I don't want to say spiritual, but that vibrational level where that they can see and experience.
Mm-hmm.
Going back, the saying that we use is, I'll see it when I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you guys ever, and all of you are old enough, maybe Tobias is not old enough, to remember Laverne and Shirley and Lenny and Squiggy.
Oh, yeah.
And Squiggy he would always screw that saying up, and he would always go, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's the case. Individuals see and experience UAP, UFO, Sasquatch, Mothman, winged humanoids, poltergeist activity because we're already sensitive and inclined to believe it and to experience it.
I think there's something to that. And as we have been getting sightings from Chicago over the years, I do believe that certain people are attuned to it, to seeing these things, just like people who are intuitive and able to sense or see certain things, or apparitions, or sense spirit energy. And as far as being able to see, say, a Bigfoot or a winged humanoid or any other type of cryptid, maybe they are able to see it, or maybe these beings have the ability to show themselves to specific people. And, some of the sightings that we have had in Chicago where people who there have been groups of people when these sightings occur. And at some occasions, it's like either one or two people will be able to see something and nobody else sees it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Tobias?
Well, that it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's something that sort of runs the gamut among paranormal phenomena, right? Is this experience of multiple people being in the same place, and sometimes they'll all see whatever the event is, but sometimes only certain people experience it, and I do think that speaks towards either an intentional behavior on the part of the entity or phenomenon, or the sort of intrinsic ability of certain people to experience things that others just can't. I think it almost has to be one of those two. I mean, at the very least, when you talk about people being able to experience things that other people can't. I mean, I always dislike it when the conversation sort of steers itself in that direction, because I don't like the kinds of people who treat something like that as a sort of superpower or something similar. It seems to be common enough, and I don't know that the missing element isn't exactly what Travis was already talking about, where they're just not open enough to it. So it's not as though like the people seeing it are necessarily special in any way that nobody else could be, were they, to get in the right state of mind. But yeah, I mean, you're all absolutely right on. That does certainly seem to be the case, and there's something to it.
It's funny, when we first started looking into this phenomenon, Manuel and I had been looking at this since 2011. But then when we brought the team together, and then, of course, it was mostly us three working on it. Well, we had other people too. I mean, of course, we had Rosemary Ellen Guiley on the team as well. But anyway, the one thing that was interesting was we were all trying to figure out what the hell these things were. and how they were manifesting and why they were manifesting. And, you know, some of the more interesting concepts were, other than interdimensional, we were talking about witchcraft, occult, possibly summoning. And I still believe there's something to summoning there. I think the Point Pleasant Mothman was a summoned being.
I do not disagree with that.
Yeah. And I know you do. I think you and I talked about that one.
We have, yes.
But we looked at a lot of different things. We had, you know, it's funny, when I wrote the first book, the Mothman Dynasty, I had everybody on the team who was investigating it give their opinion as to what it was. They thought it was. And we had all different, you know, it run the gamut. I mean, people had their opinions. I wonder if your opinions, and I'm talking to Tobias and Manuel, have your opinions changed as we have gone on with this?
They've evolved. You know, when the book first came out, you know, I was, you know, 100% sure in the camp that this was a, you know, a literal flesh and blood, you know, entity, you know, unknown to science, a true cryptid. Now I'm not even sure. I'm not. It could be any number. They could be summoned. It could be ultra terrestrial, extra dimensional. You know, it had, my views on it have changed a lot, especially since the you know, interactions with the unseen ones, especially after my experience. You know, yeah, my views have evolved and they have become a little different now.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Tobias?
Yeah, you know, I mean, very similar to Manuel. You know, I certainly my opinions have evolved since the beginning of the investigation, but I think that's only natural. You know, when you're involved with something like this, I very much try to avoid making any sort of firm determination, you know, without substantial evidence. And I think one thing that most of us can agree on is that we don't have sufficient evidence to say that this is exactly what people are seeing. You know, now there are instances, like specific cases, where you can identify, like, okay, this was, you know, a misidentification or something. But like, by and large, when we're talking about the really weird stuff, which, let's face it, that's what everybody, you know, really wants to hear about. When we're talking about the weird stuff, the potentially paranormal stuff, you know, like, the only thing that I am sure of is that it is just as weird today as it was in the spring of 2017 when I first got involved in investigating it. And, you know, like I said before, as this case goes on, I think the likelihood that the potentially paranormal cases are represented by an undiscovered biological species, I think that likelihood shrinks daily. I mean, it just doesn't make sense at this point.
Vincent asked what Rosemary thought was on these beings, and she thought it was interdimensional. Actually, she told me that from the very beginning. She didn't believe that they were indigenous beings at all. So, and you know, because we were looking into, like I said, we were looking into the occult thing and the summon thing and all that, and she came right out and told me, because her, you know, when we were getting reports, Rosemary was getting a hold of the witnesses and following up, you know, with all the sightings. So, but she told me she thought it was interdimensional.
Well, and Rosemary was, you know, one of the leading experts on the whole Jinn phenomenon.
Oh, and you dealt with the Mothman Festival, so you know, because she was involved with that a lot.
Yeah, I actually have lectured with her and sat beside her and everything. And I think, you know, and again, I think, you know, the Point Pleasant Mothman, yes, you and I have had that conversation. I do believe that particular manifestation was a summoning in some form or fashion. And again, I think, you know, and that's why I brought up the Jinn thing, because I'm not exactly sure that, you know, again, we attribute good, bad, evil. Those are words that fit our humanity. That doesn't necessarily mean it fits these entities. That doesn't mean, and that's where my theories and my beliefs in this have changed. I thought from the beginning, Mothman equals evil, and there was no in between. But I'm not sure that that's the case. I think that there are multiple types of these winged entities that are manifesting.
Mhm.
Could they be good? Could they be evil? Could they be totally complacent and not either? And we're only projecting what we feel and what we believe, what we've been taught to believe about these entities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were lucky enough to have Rosemary give the initial presentation of this phenomenon in 2017 at the Mothman Festival. And boy, I'm telling you, that really where it kicked off at, because she actually, and I don't know if you guys know this story, but there was a sighting, and I forget what neighborhood it was, and when I go back, I'll know it. But anyway, one of these sightings of this being was on a house, and we figured out that that house belonged to one of the women who was there at the presentation by pure happenstance, because she had no idea about anything to do with Mothman or anything like that. I mean, in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It was the damnedest thing. It was almost like she was pulled there to see and to find out that her house was where one of these things was seen on the roof. It was weird. It was really weird. I mean, when Rosemary told me that, I was really shocked by it. But you know, the synchronicity, you know, who's to say? I mean, we get a lot of cases where synchronicity comes into a lot of the stuff. You know, so who knows what we're in for? I think this is, you know, it has been slow sightings. Sightings have been slow over recent months, but we do get one or two that just come in, and it's like, wow, now we got a chirping being, or we got something else, or something else gonna, you know, we've had other humanoids that have been seen in relationship to these winged beings. We had UFOs, a lot of other things. But you know, I just don't. I'm just trying to imagine what we're in for. Actually, are we going to get something else? Are we going to get some evidence to point as to what these things really are, as to why they're really here? We have, you know, it's almost baby steps now, but
And it seems like I mean, it's been going on now for, I want to say, what, a little over a month maybe. We had the initial sighting with the couple that were, you know, parking, and then we had the sighting where the people were at a party, where they described it as having like a mantis head,
mhm,
that
mhm,
was on the roof of the neighbor's house next door watching them.
mhm.
And there were, I believe, 6, 7 witnesses at that one.
Mhm.
You know, those people, and this kind of ties in a little bit to what you guys were talking about earlier, being able to see things and not see things. Because that one sighting, everyone described it as a lechuza, which, if you know what it is, it's a Mexican American folklore thing. But that kind of ties in to me with the flap that we had in Little Village. How so many people were seeing this, how so many people were saying this, it was the same thing. And it kind of got me thinking, while you guys were talking about that it could not only just be vibrational, like Travis was talking about, that some people are more attuned to it. It could also be cultural. How many of
Absolutely.
us grow up listening to stories? My grandmother used to scare the living daylights out of me and all my cousins at night into behaving because of the lechuza. Don't go outside at night. The lechuza could be out there for you. You know, don't go near the river because the Llorona's there. So many of these things were so ingrained in us, and so many of the people in my family also practice, you know, cultural, witchcraft. Let's just say that, you know, curanderas, they were brujas, they were into santeria. All of that stuff is like, it's culturally ingrained into us as we grow up.
Mhm.
To many of us, it's just the fact that to us the lechuza exists because that's all we heard about as children. I mean, that's the stories, the folklore of where we come from, and I kind of think that maybe that kind of deals a double whammy with somebody, like say, who's maybe Hispanic, or maybe somebody who's like say Irish, because they might see the Fae more because culturally they grew up with it, and maybe they're also in tune to the vibrations of being able to of seeing these things because of the way they grew up.
This is something that's interesting too. Now, of course, we had people who don't know. Little Village is a mostly Hispanic neighborhood. We had 11 sightings in Little Village. But if you go back and look at all the sightings in Chicago, there is a very high percentage of Hispanic witnesses. Now, I wonder why that is.
Again, I mean, so many, a lot of the Hispanics that are in Chicago, and I can say that because I've been here for now, I've been married to my wife now 19 years, but I've been here a lot longer than that. They're transplants. They're kind of like me. And most of them grew up in the area where I grew up, like in I grew up in West Texas, but they come from like the South, or they come from Mexico. They carry that, that cultural teachings of their, their grandmothers or their abuelitas and their mothers and fathers, using those stories, to telling us these stories, trying to get us to, scare us into behaving or something. That can be a very powerful trigger. I mean, that could be something that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's a Jewish belief called the tulpa.
Right.
That's a belief system. But if so many people believe in it, and or you believe strong enough, or so many people believe in the same thing, it actually, the legend says, it comes to life. Who's not to say that things like, lechuzas or something like that, that most people who are Hispanic see it because they grew up with it. They grew up listening to their grandmothers or grandfathers tell these stories, or warning us about going out, or something. How many of these things that, people who have things happen around their house who are maybe of Irish heritage or came from like first, second generation Irish Americans don't have the stories that they grew up with listening of the Fae, and they just immediately assume it's Fae. They got Fae in the house or something. So many Hispanics that come to Chicago are transplants, and many of them are either first, second generation. They're very, still very well in tune, and especially in the Little Village area. You go there and you don't go more than a few feet without seeing the signs of that, of those beliefs.
Well, we have talked about a possibility of some of these sightings being thought forms or tulpas. That's been part of our, nomenclature with this from the very beginning. We've been grasping at straws early on. I can definitely understand that. I don't know. What do you other guys think? Do you think there's a possibility that there may be a class association, culture association with these things?
Well, I think it's an interesting point, and I'm really glad that Manuel thought to mention that, because I think it's an undervalued point in the general discussion, but I do think it's very, very important. I think that we've got a few different possibilities here. I mean, it's possible that our perception of these beings is shaped by our own belief system. So if you've been taught to believe in something like the lechuza or fairies or honestly in the 21st century aliens, anything like that, Bigfoot, maybe the entity, the being itself is able to have some kind of understanding of your expected, image of what it's supposed to look like, and can sort of modify itself to meet that expectation, or honestly, when I look at a lot of these sighting reports, and you have people who will try to describe things in terms of traditional belief systems, you just as often have people who try to describe things in terms of a movie they've seen. And so I think a lot of it is just people trying to describe the impossible, trying to find the vocabulary to explain to you something that is so far beyond their understanding. The best they can do is try to find something in their own life that they can relate this thing to, because otherwise, part of our job as investigators is stripping away narrative until we're left with nothing but the actual story, and so when I think when you strip away this narrative, be it Yakuza or demons, or what was the other one out of Little Village, goblins or something, right?
Duendes.
Yeah.
Duende. Yeah.
That was a deep cut for this particular investigation. But yeah, if once you strip that stuff away, the actual meat of the experience is very, very similar across every single case. So I think it's entirely possible what we're looking at is just people trying to place these experiences in a cultural context that they can understand.
Could it be kind of like, how they say when the way the human brain works, that it tries to always put a face to something. It tries to tries to fit it within a parameter. So who's not to say, well, how many people are going to be disappointed if the aliens do show up and they don't all look like, the typical gray, big eyes, or what's the show, Paul, or if, to somebody, maybe what if these creatures showed up to somebody who was maybe of Arabian or Middle Eastern descent? It might look like the jinn. It could be any number of things. If you say to me that you're an angel, well, two things are going to pop in my head. Either you're going to look like, the angelic, archangel, like what you see Michael, or I'm going to think you look like Castiel from Supernatural. But that's just how my brain processes it. How are we to say that these creatures aren't doing the same thing? Like Tobias has said, they're forming their view so that maybe they're not scaring the living hell out of us. I mean, and Travis would probably agree. Most people, when they think, you ask anybody who's like of a Christian faith, what does a cherub look like? Most people think little babies, with wings, and they're so cute and everything.
Little fat naked babies.
Yeah, they're not anywhere near that. They don't look like anything like that.
They actually have four faces.
Mm-hmm.
That rotate.
Most people think like demons, they look a certain way. They don't look, so many demons look completely different from what you think.
Well, this is one characteristic about being human. Everybody's got a different perception of everything.
Yes.
I mean, you can almost count on, if you put something right in front of 100 people, you're going to get a different description from most of them. It's just not going to, it's just not going to be the same thing. No. That might be what's going on here. But, it is interesting as well how consistent some of the sightings have been. As a matter of proof and what people are actually seeing. So I don't know.
And that was true in the original Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant. There were over 100 sightings over 13 months. Right. And there were what some people would call discrepancies, but I would call them, there were variations. There were variations in the height, there were variations in the color, there were variations. Some said that it was wearing like a tunic, some said that it was totally naked. There were all of these variations. And so in 2003, 2004, I was one of the first people to posit the theory, well, maybe there wasn't a Mothman, maybe there were Mothmen.
Right.
Maybe there were multiple manifestations of these entities. You're not seeing the same thing, but you're seeing the same entity or the same representation of these entities in multiple locations and multiple times.
And we're still getting sightings down there. We really
Oh
are.
yeah,
I mean, we're
it
still
never
getting
stopped.
sightings there. No. I mean, I've had a couple dozen sightings in and around Mason County over the years. So, you know.
Well, that's the interesting thing. When you go to Mason County and you talk to the individuals there, you get a split. Never been seen since the collapse of the Silver Bridge, or we're still seeing sightings.
Right.
It's one or the other. So,
let me mention this while we're here and we're all together. As some of you may know, Doug Highcheck from Monster Quest and I have formed a production company together. And we are in the process of making either films or documentaries based on these Chicago sightings. And actually, it's going to be going beyond that as well. And as time goes on, it's still a work in progress. We're still getting things together, but we are pitching it. And Tobias and Manuel are going to be part of that as well. So, this whole thing, and look, this continues on. These sightings continue on. We're going to keep looking into this, and I would really like for us, and I like the idea of having Travis come in on this for another opinion, somebody who's familiar with the phenomena, and to interject his thoughts on this. So I'd like to be able to do this every once in a while as a roundtable for us four to come on, if that's okay with you all.
Yeah,
I'm fine with it. I love hanging out with you guys. What does that say about my social life? But I love hanging out with the three of you guys on a Friday night. I mean, this is
well,
the usual suspects. There we are.
There you go. So I tell you, let's go ahead. Let me go around with each one of you and have you tell us what you have planned coming up as far as investigations or lectures or whatever you plan on doing, and how people can get in contact with you. Let me start with Travis.
As you know, and Manuel and Tobias may not, I'm working on a reissue of the Dark Wings documentary. I started that right around the time that COVID hit. That screwed everything up, but we are still working on a re-edit and a reissue of that documentary film. What I basically do, of course, I'm not part of any group or anything that does active investigations. I'm more of a researcher. I follow what you post, Lon. I try to share it as often as I can. I enjoy reading it. As far as presentations or anything like that, nothing really coming my way. They can find me on Facebook. I'm Travis Shortt. On Twitter, @Travis Shortt. There's 2 T's in Short. I'm on Instagram. You can find me on almost any social media platform, LinkedIn. And I do a combination of posting things about what I do for Vectors, what I do for Phoenix, and then what I do in my research time for the paranormal and the supernatural.
Tobias?
So I'm currently working on my third book, which I think will be a fun one as well as an interesting one. We're going to call it Singular Fortean Society's Guide to Yuletide High Strangeness, or dealing with not just sort of traditional folklore surrounding that particular season, although there is a lot of weird stuff, and I'm excited about being able to dig into that, but also sort of modern sightings of unusual phenomena around that time of year. Our next appearance is going to be at Haunted America in Alton, Illinois. That's going to be June 24th and 25th. Emily and I will be, of course, representing the Singular Fortean Society. And we're teaching a workshop on how to begin to investigate if that's something in which you are interested in doing. So I believe that event is sold out, unfortunately. But if you happen to be going anyway, I will join us our workshop. Otherwise, if you want to keep up with us, you can always go to our website, singularfortean.com. You can find us on social media. We're on all of it. Just look for the Singular Fortean Society. And if you like what we do enough that you want to be a part of it, I hope you'll check us out at patreon.com/singularfortean.
And Manuel.
Well, I'm going to continue my investigations. I will actually be going out to Bensonville tomorrow with my son, who is also an investigator as well, with UFO Clearinghouse, and we will be, visiting the sites of the last one, which is the father-daughter sighting, as well as going to visit the sighting, the last sighting before that. So we will be in that area where the Amazon driver, saw. We're taking some pictures to post to the website. But you can also catch me. I'm on social media. You can find me on Chicago Mothman and Winged Humanoid Sightings, which is a group I have online, as well as UFO Clearinghouse on all social media. You can also find me at www.ufoclearinghouse.com.
Well, very good. Well, so guys, I appreciate you coming on. We got a lot of information out there, and whenever we do get more stuff, we'll put it together and come up with another roundtable discussion. And I'm glad that you are up to coming back. And but in the meantime, just stay well and have a great weekend. And I will talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Good seeing you guys again. Looking forward to the next time.
Take care.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Take care.
Now, if you've had an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. Now, I want to again thank Tobias, Manuel, and Travis for joining me this evening. And thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you would like to be considered for the personal report show, or even posted at the website at phantomsandmonsters.com, feel free to forward to my email at lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. The Worldwide Winged Humanoid Project is still asking for reports. So if you have a sighting in the Chicagoland metro area, or anywhere else for that matter, please contact me at my email, or you can call at 410-241-5974. So next week, my guest will be Lee Hamful, and Lee is he's the farm property owner along the infamous Bray Road in south central Wisconsin. He's had several experiences involving the cryptid canine over the years, and he will join us to detail the phenomena. So it should be a very interesting show. So until next week, stay healthy, have a safe, enjoyable weekend. Good night.